What would happen if the person everyone ignored turned out to be the one person who could save a life? On a cold evening, a millionaire who had everything money could buy stood alone on the edge of losing the one thing he valued most, his reason to keep going. His business empire was crumbling, his relationships had fallen apart, and the future seemed darker than ever before. As he sat alone, convinced that nothing could change his fate, an elderly black homeless woman approached him. She had no wealth, no status, and no influence. Most people walked past her without a second glance. Yet what she did in the next few minutes would completely transform the life of a man worth millions of dollars. Her simple act of kindness would uncover a hidden truth, heal old wounds, and remind him that sometimes the people who have the least to give end up giving the most. This is the unforgettable story of a millionaire who had lost hope, and the homeless woman who helped him find it again. Success is often measured by numbers. Money in the bank, businesses owned, luxury cars parked in the driveway, and properties spread across the country. But what happens when someone has all of those things and still feels completely empty inside? This is the story of Ethan Carter, a self-made millionaire whose life appeared perfect from the outside, but was quietly falling apart behind closed doors. It is also the story of Grace Johnson, an elderly black homeless woman whose life had been filled with hardship, loss, and sacrifice. Their worlds could not have been more different. One lived in luxury. The other slept wherever she could find shelter. Yet a chance encounter between them would set off a chain of events neither could have imagined. Over the course of this journey, long-buried secrets would come to light, broken relationships would begin to heal, and a powerful lesson about humanity, compassion, and second chances would emerge. Sometimes the greatest gift does not come from wealth. Sometimes it comes from a stranger who chooses kindness when the world has forgotten them. For most of his adult life, Ethan Carter believed hard work could solve almost any problem. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, he dreamed of escaping poverty and creating a better future. Through relentless determination, long hours, and years of sacrifice, he eventually built a successful real estate business that expanded into multiple cities. By the age of 48, he owned luxury homes, drove expensive cars, and appeared regularly in business magazines. People admired him. Investors trusted him. Competitors respected him. Yet beneath the surface, a different reality existed. Success had cost Ethan more than he ever expected. His marriage ended after years of neglect caused by work. His relationship with his daughter became distant. Friendships faded. Family gatherings became rare. The more successful he became, the more isolated he felt. At first, he ignored the warning signs. He convinced himself that happiness would arrive after the next deal, the next investment, or the next milestone. But happiness never came. Instead, pressure continued growing. Then everything began unraveling at once. A series of risky business ventures failed. Market conditions shifted unexpectedly. Several major developments stalled. Lawsuits emerged. Financial losses mounted. Within months, Ethan faced challenges greater than anything he had experienced before. The empire he spent decades building suddenly appeared fragile. Every morning brought new problems. Every phone call delivered bad news. Sleep became difficult. Anxiety became constant. Even his luxurious penthouse felt empty. One rainy evening, after an especially devastating meeting with investors, Ethan left his office and wandered through the city without any destination. For the first time in his life, he felt completely defeated. The confidence that had once defined him was gone. He sat alone on a bench in a quiet public square and stared into the darkness. Around him, people hurried past, focused on their own lives. Nobody noticed the millionaire sitting alone. Nobody knew he was questioning everything. As cold wind swept through the streets, Ethan lowered his head into his hands. That's when he heard a gentle voice. "You look like someone carrying a heavy burden." He looked up and saw an elderly black homeless woman standing nearby. Her clothes were worn. Her belongings fit inside a small shopping cart, yet her eyes carried an unusual warmth. Normally, Ethan would have offered money and moved on. But something about her calm presence felt different. "You wouldn't understand," he replied quietly. The woman smiled softly. Maybe not, but sometimes talking helps. Ethan almost laughed. Here he was, a millionaire overwhelmed by problems, being offered comfort by someone who seemingly had nothing. Yet instead of walking away, she sat on the opposite end of the bench. For several minutes they simply watched the rain fall. Then, to his own surprise, Ethan began talking. He spoke about business failures, loneliness, regret, and the crushing feeling that his life had lost meaning. The woman listened without interruption. When he finished, she nodded thoughtfully. "You've spent your whole life building things," she said. "But tell me, when was the last time you built a relationship?" Her question struck him harder than any financial loss. Ethan sat silently. She continued, "Money can solve many problems, but it can't replace people." Before leaving, she handed him a small, folded piece of paper. "Read this tomorrow," she said. Then she pushed her card away and disappeared into the night. Confused, Ethan unfolded the paper the next morning. Written in neat handwriting was a simple message. "The things you have lost may not be the things you think you lost." Beneath the sentence was an address. Ethan stared at it for a long time. He had no idea why, but something told him that meeting this woman again might be the most important decision he would ever make. And without realizing it, the journey that would change his life forever had already begun. The address on the paper stayed in Ethan Carter's mind all day. He tried to focus on meetings, financial reports, and urgent calls from investors, but the words written by the elderly black homeless woman kept returning to him. "The things you have lost may not be the things you think you lost." By evening, curiosity finally overcame hesitation. He drove across the city to the address she had given him. Expecting to find a shelter or abandoned building, he was surprised when his GPS led him to a small community center tucked between aging apartment buildings. The building looked ordinary, but the parking lot was full. Children were playing outside, elderly residents sat talking on benches, and volunteers carried boxes of food through the front doors. Ethan stepped inside and immediately noticed something unusual. Despite limited resources, the place felt alive with purpose. Laughter echoed through the hallways, families gathered around tables, people greeted one another warmly. At the far end of the room, he saw the woman from the park. She was serving meals to a line of people waiting patiently. Her worn clothes and shopping cart were gone. Instead, she wore a simple volunteer badge that read, "Grace Johnson." Ethan watched in confusion. Grace noticed him and smiled as if she had expected him to come. "You found the place," she said. "What is this?" Ethan asked. Grace looked around proudly. "A second chance." She explained that the center helped struggling families, homeless individuals, unemployed workers, and elderly people living alone. For years, volunteers had worked tirelessly to keep it operating despite constant financial difficulties. Ethan listened as people approached Grace to thank her. Some hugged her. Others introduced their children. One man credited her with helping him find work after months of unemployment. A young woman explained that Grace had paid for her textbooks when nobody else would help. Everywhere Ethan looked, people seemed to know her. The woman he had assumed was simply homeless had quietly changed countless lives. "Why do they all respect you so much?" he asked. Grace laughed softly. "Because they know my story." Over the following weeks, Ethan found himself returning to the community center again and again. At first he claimed he was merely curious. But deep down he knew something else was happening. For the first time in years he felt connected to people. One evening, after helping distribute food boxes, Ethan sat with Grace outside the building. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and gold. "Tell me your story," he said. Grace remained silent for a moment before speaking. Decades earlier, she had been a successful school principal, respected throughout her community. She had a loving husband, a beautiful daughter, and dreams for the future. Then tragedy struck. A drunk driver caused an accident that took both her husband and daughter. Overwhelmed by grief, Grace struggled to continue. Medical bills consumed her savings. Depression affected her ability to work. Eventually, she lost her home. One setback led to another until she found herself homeless. Ethan listened quietly. He could hardly imagine surviving such losses. "How did you keep going?" he finally asked. Grace smiled gently. "Because pain can make you bitter or it can make you compassionate. I chose compassion." Her answer stayed with Ethan long after he returned home. Over the next month, he became increasingly involved with the center. He donated supplies, funded repairs, and volunteered whenever possible. Yet the greatest change wasn't financial. It was personal. He began speaking with people he normally would have ignored. He listened to their stories. He learned their struggles. For the first time in years, he felt something missing from his life begin to return. Then one afternoon, while organizing old files in the community center's storage room, Ethan discovered a box labeled Johnson Family Archives. Curious, he showed it to Grace. Her expression immediately changed. "I haven't opened that in years," she whispered. Together they sat down and examined its contents. Inside were photographs, letters, awards, and newspaper clippings from Grace's past life. Ethan was stunned. Grace had once been recognized nationally for her work in education. She had received awards from governors, civic organizations, and universities, yet she had never mentioned any of it. Then Ethan noticed something else. One photograph showed Grace standing beside a young businessman receiving an award at a charity event more than 20 years earlier. Ethan stared at the picture. The businessman looked familiar, very familiar. "Who is this?" he asked. Grace examined the photo. "That's your father." Ethan froze. His heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected to hear those words. His father, Michael Carter, had passed away many years earlier. Growing up, Ethan always viewed him as a hardworking entrepreneur who valued community service. Yet after becoming successful himself, Ethan had drifted away from many of those values. Grace continued studying the photograph. "Your father helped fund literacy programs throughout the city. He was one of the kindest men I ever met." Ethan felt an unexpected wave of emotion. For years, he had been so focused on business that he rarely thought about the lessons his father once taught him. Grace opened another envelope from the box. Inside was a handwritten letter. The date was nearly 25 years old. As she read it, tears filled her eyes. Then she handed it to Ethan. The letter was from his father. In it, Michael Carter thanked Grace for her dedication to helping others and wrote something that would change Ethan forever. "The true measure of success is not how much you keep, but how many lives are better because you lived." Ethan read the sentence repeatedly. It felt as if his father were speaking directly to him across time. That night, sitting alone in his penthouse, he looked around at the luxury he had spent decades accumulating. Expensive artwork lined the walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Every possession reflected achievement. Yet for the first time, he questioned whether he had been measuring success the wrong way all along. Meanwhile, unknown to Ethan, serious trouble was approaching. Investors unhappy with his recent business decisions were quietly organizing against him. Several board members planned to force him out of his own company. Financial pressures continued mounting. Lawsuits remained unresolved. And just as Ethan began rebuilding his sense of purpose, the greatest challenge of his life was about to arrive. But this time, he would not face it alone. Because the elderly black homeless woman who had changed countless lives was about to reveal a secret that connected her destiny to his family in a way neither of them could have imagined. And when that truth finally came to light, everything would change. The discovery of his father's letter changed something deep inside Ethan Carter. For days, he carried a copy folded neatly inside his wallet, reading it whenever the pressure of life threatened to overwhelm him. The words echoed through his mind during board meetings, investor calls, and sleepless nights. "The true measure of success is not how much you keep, but how many lives are better because you lived." Yet despite the inspiration he found in the message, his business problems continued to grow. Investors became increasingly impatient. Several major projects remained stalled. Financial news outlets speculated about the future of his company. Competitors sensed weakness and began positioning themselves to take advantage. The empire Ethan had spent decades building appeared closer than ever to collapse, but unlike before, he no longer faced these challenges alone. Grace Johnson had become an unexpected source of wisdom. Nearly every evening, Ethan visited the community center, helping wherever he could. Sometimes he served meals. Other times he repaired equipment, organized donations, or simply listened to people's stories. The experience was changing him. For the first time in years, he felt useful in a way money alone had never provided. One afternoon, while helping sort through archived records stored in the center's basement, Grace called Ethan over to a dusty filing cabinet. "I found something you should see," she said quietly. Inside was a collection of documents dating back nearly 30 years. Most appeared ordinary at first glance: community grant applications, educational records, volunteer registrations. But one folder immediately caught Ethan's attention. His father's name was written across the top. Confused, he opened it. What he found left him speechless. The folder contained dozens of letters exchanged between Grace and Michael Carter. The correspondence stretched across many years. As Ethan began reading, he discovered a side of his father he had never known. Long before becoming successful, Michael had volunteered extensively in underprivileged communities. He quietly funded literacy programs, scholarship initiatives, and food assistance projects. Even more surprising, Grace had played a major role in many of those efforts. Their friendship extended back decades, yet neither had ever spoken publicly about it. Ethan looked up in disbelief. "Why didn't he tell me any of this?" Grace smiled sadly. "Because he wasn't doing it for recognition." As they continued reviewing the letters, another revelation emerged. During one particularly difficult period in Michael's life, when his first business was close to bankruptcy, Grace had helped him secure a community grant that kept several educational programs alive. More importantly, she had encouraged him not to abandon his dream. Without her support during those years, Ethan realized his father's future success might never have happened. The discovery created a powerful realization. The woman society now viewed as homeless had once helped shape the future of the Carter family. Her influence had quietly touched generations, yet the most shocking secret was still waiting to be uncovered. A few days later, Grace invited Ethan to meet someone. She explained only that the person had known both her and his father for many years. Curious, Ethan agreed. They drove to a small nursing home on the edge of the city. Inside, they were greeted by an elderly man named Samuel Walker. Though age had weakened his body, his memory remained remarkably sharp. As soon as Ethan introduced himself, Samuel smiled warmly. "You have your father's eyes," he said. Over the next hour, Samuel shared stories about Michael Carter and Grace Johnson that Ethan had never heard before. He described their volunteer work, community projects, and countless efforts to help struggling families. Then the conversation took an unexpected turn. Samuel mentioned a young woman named Rebecca Carter. Ethan's heart skipped. Rebecca was his older sister, or at least that was what he had always believed. Samuel paused, realizing Ethan's confusion. "Wait," he said carefully. "You don't know?" Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. "Know what?" The room suddenly became very quiet. Samuel looked toward Grace, who lowered her eyes. After a long silence, Grace finally spoke. "Your father wanted to tell you himself one day." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Tell me what?" Grace took a deep breath. "Rebecca wasn't your biological sister." Ethan stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Grace explained that many years earlier, one of her closest friends had passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind a young daughter with no family capable of caring for her. Michael Carter had stepped forward and adopted the child, raising her as his own. To protect her privacy and ensure she felt fully accepted, very few people were told the truth. Ethan struggled to process the revelation. He loved Rebecca deeply. She had always been his sister in every way that mattered, yet learning this hidden chapter of his family's history shook him. "Why keep it secret?" he asked. Grace's eyes filled with emotion. "Because your father never wanted her to feel different." The revelation left Ethan thoughtful for days. It also made him appreciate his father even more. Michael Carter's life had been filled with acts of compassion that rarely appeared in headlines or business magazines. The more Ethan learned, the more he realized how much he had misunderstood the man he admired. Meanwhile, tensions inside Ethan's company reached a breaking point. A group of investors formally demanded his resignation. They argued that his focus on charitable projects and community involvement distracted him from business responsibilities. Emergency board meetings were scheduled. Financial analysts predicted a leadership crisis. Reporters camped outside corporate headquarters searching for answers. One morning, Ethan arrived at the office to find a confidential document waiting on his desk. The contents stunned him. Someone inside the company had been secretly manipulating financial reports for years. The irregularities predated his current problems and involved several senior executives. If exposed, the scandal could destroy careers and trigger criminal investigations. Ethan immediately launched an internal review. As evidence mounted, it became clear that many of the difficulties threatening the company were not caused by market conditions alone. Corruption and dishonesty had quietly infected parts of the organization. The discovery forced Ethan into the biggest decision of his professional life. He could hide the truth to protect the company's reputation, or expose it and risk everything. That evening, overwhelmed by the weight of the choice, he visited Grace. Sitting outside the community center, he explained the situation. Grace listened carefully before offering the same calm wisdom that had guided him from the beginning. "Your father faced difficult choices too," she said. "Character isn't revealed when decisions are easy. It's revealed when doing the right thing costs you something." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Deep down, he already knew what he had to do. The next chapter of his life would determine not only the future of his company, but also the kind of man he wanted to become. And as the truth moved closer to becoming public, neither he nor Grace could imagine just how dramatically their lives were about to change. The greatest challenge was still ahead, and so was the greatest reward. The morning Ethan Carter decided to expose the corruption inside his company was the morning his life changed forever. For years, he had built his reputation as a fearless businessman, but this challenge was unlike any deal, lawsuit, or market crash he had ever faced. The evidence collected by his investigators revealed a disturbing pattern of deception stretching back nearly a decade. Senior executives whom he had trusted manipulated financial reports, concealed losses, and approved unethical transactions that benefited themselves while placing the company at risk. The easiest option would have been to bury the findings, protect the company's image, and move forward. Many advisors encouraged him to do exactly that. They warned that exposing the truth could destroy investor confidence, collapse stock prices, and permanently damage the Carter name. But Ethan kept thinking about his father's words and Grace's advice. For the first time in many years, he cared more about doing what was right than protecting what was comfortable. During an emergency board meeting attended by executives, investors, attorneys, and financial regulators, Ethan presented the evidence publicly. The room fell silent as document after document appeared on the screen. Several executives immediately denied the allegations. Others attempted to shift blame. But the facts were undeniable. By the end of the meeting, multiple executives were suspended pending investigation, and regulators launched formal inquiries. News spread across the country within hours. Headlines described the scandal as one of the largest corporate investigations in recent memory. Financial networks broadcast special reports. Investors panicked. The company's stock price dropped dramatically. Critics predicted Ethan's downfall. Yet despite the chaos, Ethan felt an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time in years, he knew he was standing on the right side of the truth. Meanwhile, Grace continued her work at the community center, seemingly unaffected by the media storm. She spent her days helping families, mentoring young people, and comforting those struggling through difficult times. To most people, she remained an elderly, homeless woman with little influence. But Ethan increasingly realized that she possessed something more valuable than wealth, wisdom earned through suffering. One evening, after another exhausting day of crisis management, Ethan visited the center. He expected to find comfort in a familiar conversation. Instead, he found Grace sitting alone in her office looking unusually serious. "There's something I've never told you," she said quietly. Ethan immediately sensed the importance of her words. Grace opened a small wooden box and removed an old photograph. The image showed a much younger Grace standing beside Michael Carter and another man Ethan did not recognize. "Who is he?" Ethan asked. Grace stared at the photograph for a long moment before answering. "Your grandfather." Ethan's eyes widened. He had never seen the man before. His grandfather died before he was born, and very few family records existed. Grace then revealed a secret she had carried for more than 30 years. During the early days of Michael Carter's career, Ethan's grandfather had lost everything trying to save a struggling neighborhood from redevelopment. While powerful investors sought profits, he fought to protect families from losing their homes. The effort bankrupted him. Many people abandoned him, but Grace and Michael remained by his side. The experience shaped Michael's entire philosophy about success and service. "Your father learned that money without purpose eventually becomes empty," Grace explained. Ethan listened carefully. Every new story seemed to reveal another layer of the values his father had tried to pass on. Then Grace handed him a sealed envelope. "Your father left this with me years ago," she said. "He told me to give it to you when you finally understood what success really means." Ethan's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The words felt almost alive. Michael wrote about mistakes he had made, lessons he learned, and hopes he carried for his son. He admitted there were times when he worried Ethan would become consumed by ambition, but he also expressed confidence that one day life would teach him what truly mattered. Near the end of the letter, one sentence stood out above all others. "The people who change your life are rarely the people you expect." Ethan looked up at Grace. Suddenly, he understood exactly what his father meant. Had he not met her on that rainy evening, he might have continued chasing money while losing everything important along the way. Over the following months, the investigations into the company continued. More evidence emerged. Several executives resigned. Others faced legal consequences. Though the process was painful, the organization slowly began rebuilding itself on a stronger foundation. Employees responded positively to the changes. Customers regained trust. Investors gradually returned. The company survived, but it emerged transformed. Yet the biggest surprise arrived when national media outlets began telling Grace's story. Journalists uncovered decades of quiet acts of kindness. Former students she had helped became doctors, teachers, engineers, and community leaders. Families she had supported shared emotional testimonies. Donations flooded the community center. Volunteers arrived from across the country. What had once been a struggling local organization suddenly became a symbol of hope. Grace accepted the attention reluctantly. She never sought recognition, but she understood that if her story inspired others to help their communities, then some good could come from it. One afternoon, as Ethan walked through the crowded center, he noticed something remarkable. Children were studying in new classrooms funded by donations. Families received assistance. Elderly residents found companionship. People from every background worked together toward a common purpose. Looking around, Ethan realized this place generated more meaningful impact than many of the multi-million-dollar projects he had spent years pursuing. For the first time, he began imagining a future where business success and community service could exist side by side. Unknown to both Ethan and Grace, however, another twist was approaching. While organizing old archives donated to the center, volunteers uncovered a collection of documents hidden inside a forgotten storage room. Among them was evidence connected to a decades-old financial trust established by Ethan's grandfather. The records suggested that a substantial amount of money, believed lost for years, might still exist. Even more surprising, the trust listed Grace Johnson among its original beneficiaries. As lawyers and historians began examining the discovery, questions emerged about why the trust disappeared and who controlled it. What initially seemed like a forgotten historical footnote quickly developed into a mystery capable of changing both Ethan's future and Grace's life forever. Neither of them knew it yet, but the greatest revelation of all was still waiting to be uncovered. And when the truth finally surfaced, it would connect the Carter family and Grace Johnson in a way nobody could have imagined. The story that began with a lonely millionaire and a homeless woman was about to become something much bigger, a story about legacy, destiny, and the extraordinary power of kindness to echo across generations. The discovery of the Forgotten Trust Fund transformed what had already become an extraordinary story into something almost unbelievable. For weeks, attorneys, historians, accountants, and financial investigators worked tirelessly to verify the documents uncovered in the community center's storage room. What they found stunned everyone involved. Decades earlier, Ethan Carter's grandfather, William Carter, had secretly established a charitable trust designed to support community development projects, educational programs, and affordable housing initiatives. The trust had been funded with assets that were expected to grow over time. However, after William's financial collapse and subsequent death, the trust appeared to vanish. Most experts assumed the money had been lost forever. Yet hidden among the newly discovered records was evidence that the trust had never disappeared at all. Instead, it had continued growing quietly through investments managed by a small legal firm following William's original instructions. Due to administrative errors, lost paperwork, and the passage of time, nobody realized the assets still existed. By the time the investigation concluded, the value of the trust exceeded hundreds of millions of dollars. News of the discovery spread rapidly. Journalists called it one of the most remarkable financial mysteries ever solved. Legal experts struggled to explain how such a large fund remained hidden for so many years. But the biggest surprise involved the list of beneficiaries. According to William Carter's original documents, a significant portion of the trust was intended for projects overseen by Grace Johnson and future community leaders committed to public service. When Ethan learned the full details, he sat speechless in the attorney's office. The woman he first met sleeping on park benches had unknowingly become connected to a fortune larger than most people could imagine. Yet when the attorneys informed Grace about the discovery, her reaction stunned everyone. She showed almost no excitement. While others discussed numbers, investments, and opportunities, Grace simply asked one question: "How many people can we help?" Her response reminded Ethan once again why she had changed his life. Most people dreamed of becoming wealthy. Grace dreamed of improving lives. As legal proceedings finalized the trust's status, Ethan faced another major decision. Several investors urged him to use the newly discovered fortune to strengthen his company and expand its influence. Others suggested creating a family office that would preserve the wealth for future generations. Yet the more Ethan reflected on his grandfather's vision, his father's lessons, and Grace's example, the clearer his path became. During a nationally televised press conference, Ethan announced a bold initiative. Together with Grace, he would establish the Carter Johnson Foundation, one of the largest privately funded charitable organizations in the country. The foundation's mission would focus on education, homelessness prevention, youth mentorship, affordable housing, and community revitalization. The announcement generated enormous public interest. Donations poured in from business leaders, celebrities, and ordinary citizens inspired by the story. Volunteers signed up in record numbers. Within months, the foundation launched programs in multiple cities. New schools received funding. Housing projects broke ground. Scholarship programs opened applications. Thousands of families began receiving support. For the first time, William Carter's forgotten dream was becoming reality. Meanwhile, Ethan's personal life continued changing in ways he never expected. Inspired by everything he had learned about his father, he reached out to his estranged daughter. Their relationship had suffered years of neglect. Rebuilding trust would not be easy. The first conversations felt awkward. Old wounds remained. But unlike before, Ethan no longer tried solving problems with money. He listened. He apologized. He showed up consistently. Slowly, the distance between them began shrinking. One afternoon, months later, they shared lunch together at a small cafe. As they laughed over childhood memories, Ethan realized he felt happier than he had during any major business victory. The success he spent decades chasing suddenly seemed insignificant compared to moments like this. Grace also experienced unexpected changes. Although she now had access to immense resources, she refused to live extravagantly. Instead, she moved into a modest home near the community center and continued serving people almost exactly as she had before. The only difference was the scale of her impact. What once helped dozens of families now helped thousands. Yet despite the recognition, awards, and media attention, she remained the same compassionate woman Ethan met on that rainy evening. Her humility inspired everyone around her. Over time, schools taught her story. Universities invited her to speak. Community leaders sought her advice. She became a symbol of resilience and kindness. Then came the event that brought everything full circle. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, the Carter Johnson Foundation completed construction of a massive community campus dedicated to education, healthcare, job training, and housing support. Tens of thousands attended the grand opening. Families who had benefited from foundation programs shared emotional testimonies. Students who received scholarships described how their lives changed. Former homeless individuals spoke about finding stability and hope. Standing before the enormous crowd, Ethan looked toward Grace sitting in the front row. Memories flooded back. The rainy evening, the lonely park bench, the folded piece of paper, and the simple act of kindness that started it all. When it was his turn to speak, he paused for several moments before addressing the audience. "Years ago," he said, "I thought I had lost everything that mattered. I believed success was measured by money, power, and achievements. Then I met someone who had almost nothing, and she taught me everything." The crowd erupted in applause as cameras focused on Grace. Tears filled many eyes. Ethan continued, "People often ask what changed my life. They expect me to talk about business decisions or financial opportunities. The truth is much simpler." One person cared enough to stop and listen. Grace smiled quietly as the audience rose to its feet. Looking across the crowd, Ethan realized the story had never been about a millionaire or a fortune. It was about compassion. It was about second chances. It was about the extraordinary impact one person can have simply by choosing kindness. As the ceremony ended and the sun began setting behind the new campus, Ethan and Grace walked through the grounds together. Children played in newly built parks. Students studied in modern classrooms. Families gathered in community spaces. Everywhere they looked, lives were being changed. "Your father would be proud," Grace said softly. Ethan looked around and smiled. "I think my grandfather would be too." For a moment, neither spoke. They simply watched the future unfolding before them. The millionaire who had once given up on life had discovered something far more valuable than wealth. And the elderly black homeless woman everyone overlooked had left a legacy that would endure for generations. In the end, the greatest fortune was never hidden inside a trust fund, a company, or a bank account. It was hidden inside a simple act of kindness that changed a life, and then changed thousands more. The story that began with despair ended with hope, proving that sometimes the people the world overlooks are the very people capable of changing it forever.